Earlier today, Starfield got a new update. This was just under 1 GB on PC and about 2.6 GB on Xbox. And although this update doesn't feature hundreds of changes, what it does change is actually pretty big. One of your favorite exploits likely just got deleted, but in the process, Bethesda also broke something about the game and created a new bug on their own. Although in addition to this, Starfield just crossed a major milestone as it is now rated lower than Fallout 76 on Steam, so we need to talk about that, as well as a new Todd interview gives us a background and insight in some of the more controversial design decisions around Starfield and why exactly they went that way. But first, I'm going to help you eat better. That with today's video sponsor, HelloFresh. Do you hate cooking? I mean, yeah, I did too, before I got all of the ingredients I need delivered straight to my door with some pretty easy to follow instructions. And apparently I don't suck at cooking, I just suck at figuring out what to cook. And HelloFresh solves all of that. You can get a big box of food delivered right to your door on a weekly basis and avoid those extended trips to the grocery store. And this won't get old, as HelloFresh has 40 recipes to choose from each week, including some very fun fall recipes. And HelloFresh has more than just dinner. There are over 100 add-on items like easy breakfast, quick lunches, or even just a tasty snack or two. Just shop the HelloFresh Market and add any of these quick meal solutions to your weekly box. And since you watched this video, you could even get all of this for a ridiculously good deal. Use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use code POGJUICE50 for 50% off plus free shipping. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Looking back at this update, it does fix a few major issues in Starfield, although notably it does not introduce any of the new features Bethesda recently talked about in their last update post. And they do comment on that. We're continuing to work on a larger update that will add in those features and improvements, so that is coming at some point. This update fixed a bug where some characters wouldn't be in their proper location. This was both funny and frustrating, where sometimes vendors or other quest characters would just be gone. And some users even found those characters under the map, but thankfully this has since been fixed. Another at points hilarious bug was where you would randomly get a star station as your spaceship. Some users were even able to fly around in star stations, and this was pretty funny until they realized that, oh, now they don't have access to any of their other ships anymore, and all they could use is a star station. Thankfully this too was fixed, although at one point I would love to see a star station DLC. And one fix that will definitely devastate many, the vendor chest exploit is dead. With this patch, Bethesda removed those under the map vendor chests that you could access in 3 major cities. If you weren't familiar with this one, it was an exploit where you could glitch under the map to open a chest that contained a vendor's entire inventory. So you could steal thousands of credits, but also all of the items that vendor was selling. But now all of these chests are gone. I'm sure another money exploit will pop up in time, but for now, yeah, this one's gone. There were 2 minor fixes around lens flares from stars not working with some AMD GPUs, as well as photosensitivity issues caused by the inventory screen. But the most notable change on the visual side was Bethesda addressed an upscaling issue that could cause textures to become blurry. This was a big one. One of the most popular mods for Starfield was known as the upscaling fix, and it addressed this issue, where basically due to a bug in the upscaling implementation, foliage would sometimes appear blurry. But now Bethesda has fixed it natively, at least kind of. Unfortunately, in the process of fixing the first issue, they created another one and kind of a bigger one, as now some clothing textures in Starfield will look a bit odd. You can see an example of this here, as the same mod author to fix the first issue has now fixed this secondary issue to pop up. Shout out to Doodles. And basically what happened here was Bethesda disabled mip maps with the latest update, fixing the terrain weirdness, but clothing needed mip maps to avoid getting some of these noticeable artifacts that you can see as you're using an upscaler. So a bit of an annoying one, but modders on PC have already made this a lot better. And what is perhaps going to be the biggest change from this update, hand scanner hitching was resolved. This was another one of those very popular mods out there, but basically in Starfield, there was an issue where some weapons for certain players would cause intense lag as soon as you opened the scanner. Basically, your game would freeze for a second or two. As you can imagine, this is incredibly frustrating with how often you're using your scanner in Starfield and just periodically having the game freeze. But that was fixed along with a variety of the ship disappearing bugs. An incredibly frustrating issue in Starfield was, after putting some of your items on a ship's mannequin, they could just disappear. Those items would be gone forever. There were several PSAs around this issue posted in the community, and even worse, if you were using that special mantis ship known as the Razorleaf, the storage containers as well as some of the weapon racks on that ship could also sometimes delete your items. So you could just lose weapons or other things stored on the Razorleaf, but thankfully each of these issues has been fixed with this update. It seems like now now, largely most of the item deletion issues have been resolved, at least when it comes to spaceships. Although this is just a proactive fix, and if you already lost an item as a result of one of these bugs, it's likely just gone forever. In addition to all of that, there were some general crashing and freezing improvements mentioned, but otherwise that is the second major update to come to Starfield, which of course will have the side effect of breaking a lot of your mods, particularly things like the Starfield script extender mods will need to be updated now. But we also need to talk about Starfield's dropping review scores. Around release, Starfield debuted on Steam with a user score in the mid-80s. Depending on what time of day you checked, it ranged from around 88 to 85, and it largely stayed there for the first couple of days. But in the several weeks now since Starfield's release, the review score has been dropping a few points each week, and now if you look at Starfield's review score, it sits at 71.38%, notably down several points from when we looked at it even just last week. And this is major, as now this puts Starfield as a worse reviewed game on Steam than Fallout 76, as Fallout 76 has 71.76% positive reviews compared to Starfield's 71.38%. And this comes at a very interesting point, as at the time of filming, both of these games have near identical numbers of reviews. Starfield has just 864 fewer reviews than Fallout 76, which in the scheme of 90,000 reviews being less than 1,000 reviews apart is pretty freaking close. And this is just wild. Starfield and Fallout 76 are basically even right now as far as Steam reviews go. Now in fairness, this is not the launch version of Fallout 76. Fallout 76 only came to Steam in 2020 after several major updates, and quite literally years of bug fixing, but this definitely seems to reflect a shift in fan sentiment around Starfield. There are definitely some people just review bombing the game who are unhappy with it for one reason or another, but in general you've also seen people just not love Starfield as much. It went from heavily in the Game of the Year discussions before release to not really being brought up all that often now. I'm going to have a video diving deeper into what's going on with all of this, as well as some of the other issues on Starfield in the next couple of days, so get subscribed to look out for that one. But then we also have this new Todd Howard interview, which is incredibly interesting. Several of the more controversial or underutilized features in Starfield are talked about from Todd's perspective here. So we get to hear why certain features work in a certain way from a dev's perspective. And one of the big ones on this front was Todd Howard was okay with people discovering things in the game and sharing it.
It's a very complex game, and we were okay, for better or worse, with people discovering things in it and sharing that. So they're still finding things. By the time this runs, they're still going to be finding things. And I think that is a little bit of a bonus because it is a single player game where people are able to share these water cooler moments the next day. Be like, did you know you could do this? You can? I didn't know that. Why don't they explain that?
I found this one to be pretty interesting because I kind of see both sides on this front. On one hand, those random space encounters are incredibly fun. On numerous occasions with Starfield, I've had this fun loop of seeing a post online about some cool mechanic, and then going in my own game and trying it out and finding, oh wow, that actually works. That's really cool. But it seems like Bethesda took this even a step further. It seems like this is why Starfield doesn't have as in-depth tutorials for certain systems like crafting, outposts, or shipbuilding. I know that was a frustration for many, especially around release. It seems like Bethesda almost did want people creating videos or posts explaining certain features and how they work, and then having their fans seek out that content as opposed to just the game explaining it. During the review phase, this was a huge point of frustration for me. I almost just didn't dive into outpost building because I just had to figure it all out on my own. Now fortunately, it doesn't seem like this is a big issue because you can pretty much just watch a video guide or read an article on all of the major systems in Starfield. Basically everything's been written about, but to me it's super interesting to learn that this was a deliberate decision as opposed to an oversight from Bethesda. Todd Howard also describes how in 2013 they decided to make Starfield, and that timing is quite typical. Halfway through Fallout 4 they decided that Starfield would be next, and that's pretty common. It's oftentimes halfway through one game where they decide what the next game they'll be making is. And we are in a very interesting period for that now. We know the Elder Scrolls 6 is next, but we don't actually know what comes after that, as Todd Howard has said that after the Elder Scrolls 6 we may not get Fallout 5. So in the next couple of years, as Bethesda fully dives into the Elder Scrolls 6, which we know right now is in full production, but soon enough they'll be deciding whatever is next, and perhaps we'll start to hear about that in interviews. More so than any other game Bethesda has made, Starfield has real intention to be built as a game that will be around for a very long time.
So Starfield, I would say, was the most intentional going into it. This is a game people are going to play for a long time. How do we build it such that it is allowing that in a way that feels natural And if people have played the game and if you finish the main quest, et cetera, you can see that. But it's also one where, okay, what does Starfield look like in 3 months? What does it look like in 6 months? What's it like in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? I think we've learned that that's going to happen. So let's be ready for it, make the most of it, embrace it. And that's both what we do here and with our modding community. We've learned so much there, and just giving ourselves a really, really good base of a game to build upon for everybody.
And that quote definitely makes me think we could see some of the most powerful mod tools ever for Bethesda Game Studios game, especially if we also get paid mods early next year. It makes sense to invest in better mod tools so modders can create better mods, and if those mods are being sold for money, Bethesda gets more money from their cut. All of this seems like a very practical long-term strategy Bethesda might be going for, and honestly, as I play Starfield, I am constantly thinking about how much mods can do with this game. I feel like once mods start to come out, and really probably a year after mods come out and people start to figure things out and some of the more advanced mods come, Starfield will reach a completely new level. Early on into Starfield's development, Bethesda realized they would need to update their engine to achieve what they wanted to do with this game. And one thing that did take a long time was figuring out how to make random planets fun, and evolving the systems that generate random encounters in Starfield on planets and making sure those are also fun. It's interesting to hear that this took a while, as I think many would argue random planets in Starfield aren't fun. For me personally, after I landed on like a dozen planets, I kind of got the idea. I feel like I learned the random encounter system, and things very quickly got tedious after that. Although on the flip side, spaceships and ship combat were one of the features of Starfield to get worked on constantly over the entire course of development. Flying around in space was one of the early projects on the game, and reportedly this was only finalized about a year ago. Starfield began development about 8 years ago. And in this process, to make space combat fun, they describe having to make the AI very stupid, otherwise it was just overpowering. And here, Todd gives major praise to the team that worked on this, describing how they had to be fine with building out a system, then completely changing it if things didn't feel good, and that did happen several times, the team was able to move on. And on this front, I honestly think they nail it. Flying around in your spaceship, albeit sometimes pointless, is surprisingly enjoyable, especially for Bethesda Game Studios. I definitely didn't think they would be able to make spaceships and ship combat feel this good. Todd Howard also describes how sometimes something just needs to be removed during game development, and one such feature that was significantly scaled back in Starfield are planetary hazards.
We just nerfed the hell out of it. Where it ends up being, it matters, but only a little bit. It matters more in flavor. Like the affliction you get is more annoying knowing you have it than the game result. We had originally wanted where, okay, I have multiple spacesuits. I have one for high radiation planets, I have one for really cold planets, I have ones for these environments.
This is notable because this too has become a larger complaint with the game, at least among some of the hardcore fans, who do want some of those other systems to have a bit more meaning and impact in gameplay. I feel like Starfield would have really benefited from a survival mode, and I'm honestly surprised we didn't get one. It sounds like Bethesda neutered several systems during development to up enjoyment, but it definitely seems like there's a subset of fans out there that would enjoy having some of the hardcore systems in place, and leaving certain things in their more difficult original forms in an optional mode definitely seems like it would make sense. I hope it's something that comes in the future. As well as we get some insight into Starfield's development timeline, as this game was finished a lot earlier than most people probably think.
We had a version of the game, one of our goals last holiday was everybody went home for a holiday break and the game was basically done. There were bugs and etc., but here's a full game. You can play it on we flighted it on the retail Xbox. You can play it at home on your Xbox and your PC.
And Todd Howard continues on to mention how their games being done so early was not standard for them, but it will be now. Seemingly, they are very happy with how Starfield released, and he even mentions that he was very happy with the level of bugginess on release. At least for the scale of this game, the bugs have definitely been minimal with Starfield, and I largely agree with this sentiment. Starfield definitely has some issues, but bugs were not one of the major ones for me. And hearing Todd Howard say this will be the new standard is something I think all Bethesda Game Studios fans should love. Less buggy releases from Bethesda is a great thing, and I have to imagine the extra Microsoft support is a major aspect as to why all of that is possible.